Okay, so I did my ELL thematic unit on boats for second grade. So in terms of this presentation, I'm choosing to talk about my third lesson plan for my thematic unit, and it's a science activity. The title of the plan is Exploring Boat Materials, and it's about 30 minutes in length. The standard this for science is 2 PS1, and it's plan and conduct an investigation to describe and classify different kinds of materials by their observable properties. The objective is second grade students will be able to demonstrate an understanding of all that they have learned thus far about boats by exploring boat materials through a hands-on activity, being sure to accurately depict what they observe about each item. That is the content objective. And the ELD standards that are addressed is English language learners communicate information, ideas, and concepts necessary for academic success in the content area of science, as well as English language learners communicate in English for social and instructional purpose within the school setting because they will be working in groups and it does require collaboration. So for the language objectives, students A through D, the domain for student A is focused on speaking and they're at a 2.8, which means their proficiency level is in beginning. Student B's domain for listening is a 4.0, which means that they are in the expanding proficiency level. Student C's domain for reading is a 2.9, which puts them in the beginning proficiency level. And then student D's domain for writing is a 1.3, which puts them in the entering level. So for their individual language objectives, student A, the second grade student will be able to develop their speaking skills when interacting with their team members when at each station properly depicting what they observe. Student B's language objective is the second grade student will be able to develop their listening skills when interacting with other students at their station, hearing and understanding what they think about the objects provided. Student C's is the second grade student will be able to develop their reading skills when properly being able to code and read the what do you notice sheet as well as the objects provided. And student D, the second grade student will be able to develop their writing skills when they are writing down what they observe on the what do you notice sheet. Students can write down symbols or single words to represent their ideas about each object. So as long as they have something on their sheet, it's what they're supposed to be doing. As for the activity itself, and this goes for all students in the classroom, both ELL and not, students will be given time to move around the different stations around the room in groups about 4 to 5 students. The student's job is to observe each boating material at each station. So like the back table might have a life jacket, while the teacher's table might have a wooden block. And I have all of the materials on the next slide. So they can use their senses to make observations about each materials, about their characteristics and their appearances. Their job is to record their observations on the recording sheet that is provided. Once students have had a turn to observe each object at every station, they'll return to the carpet and participate in a whole group discussion about what they observed and recorded about each item. Students will also talk about the importance of each item and how they're associated with boats and how they are used. Students are assessed based on what they said about each item and if they have participated in the activity. Students were also assessed on how they interacted with their team members and with the objects provided. So very much they're assessed on if they participate and how they interact well with others. This is the recording sheet that every student is given. So students will share their observations by writing it on the recording sheet provided. So as it shows, like if they go to the wood station, they're going to write down single word or sentence characteristics for each item. Now, questions that students should think about when going around to each station is the object heavy or lightweight? What is its texture? And in our previous day, like before this lesson, there was a lesson where we talked strictly about texture, so they should already be applying what they know about it to this activity. What is the size and the shape? What is the color of the object? And what does it look like it's made out of? Because this whole activity is all about materials that boats are made out of, as well as objects on boats. So like, is it made out of wood, metal, plastic? And as you see on here, wood, metal, and plastic are all objects they're going to be observing. So they're going to be looking at their materials to see what makes them different. because boats can be made out of all of them. The objects that are going to be used in the activity, there's going to be 8 stations. There's going to be a wood block, so students can observe because boats can be made out of wood. There's going to be boating rope, which is an object that's used on a boat. There's plastic bin, but the idea here is not the bowl itself, it's the plastic. So they're going to be observing that material. A compass, a ship's bell, a piece of metal, a life jacket, and an anchor. Now, the anchor is specifically not going to be a plastic one. It's going to be like a metal or a cast iron one of like a smaller size so that they can actually get the weight of a real anchor compared to if you were to buy a plastic one online. When it comes to ELL supports for student A, students will be given a variety of interactive supports and sensory supports, such as, first of all, their team members is a good support. Because they're at each station and they can be used as a resource when it comes to asking questions or just sharing general observations. Real life objects are used in this lesson while the students are studying their features. Students will be able to touch, feel, and see with their own eyes the objects at hand with this interactive hands-on activity. And students will also be given a caption for each object, like each of the objects on the previous slide. They'll be given it in their home language as well as in English, because when the student is speaking, which is what they're learning on for their domain, if they learn it in their home language, it'll be a little bit more easier to learn it in English if they're giving it to them in their home language. So this will help them become familiar with the object, especially when speaking about it. For student B, students will be given a variety of interactive and sensory supports, such as cooperative learning structures. Like I've said before, they are working in teams, so they have a lot of peer support. Again, real life objects are used in this activity when students are analyzing their features, and tech support, such as a translator in their home language, can help when students are listening to their peers' thoughts and opinions as well as directions. So if their classmate is saying something about an object that they're not fully aware of or can't fully understand, they can use this translator to translate what their classmate is saying in English and translate it to their home language so that they have a better understanding of the material that is being shared. Student C, students will be given a interactive and graphic support such as cooperative learning structures, such as building off what other students say during the activity will be a great support for these students. And students will be given the words in their home language as a caption to their paper to help them identify the objects. This is the biggest support that is relevant for this activity, is because there is so many objects written in English and there's so many different objects. A big support would be providing that object in that home language for that student so they have a better understanding on what it is so that they can apply that prior knowledge when looking at it. Student D's supports will be graphic, and for this one, they will have an adjective chart with pictures that can help them if they need supports on thinking of descriptive words when observing each object, because each box does ask the students to write down characteristics or what they observe. So if a student is having a hard time looking at a compass and trying to say, oh, it's shiny, and they can't think of that word in English, they'll be given an adjective chart that will help them with some descriptive words, especially when trying to talk about their characteristics. They will also be provided tech support, such as a translator, which will translate it into their home language, that can help when students need to formulate their observations into words for their recording chart. So for each of the language assessments, student A, I would make sure that the ELL student met their language objective by making sure they were able to develop their speaking skills, by making sure they were collaborating and interacting with their peers by sharing their ideas, their thoughts, their observations, or even simply when they asked questions. So I wanted to make sure that they are interacting with their team members that they are put with. For student B, I would make sure that the ELL student met their objective for listening, simply based on their behavior when their classmates are sharing what they find about each item. Are they listening to their peers? Are they listening to what they have to say? Are they being good team members? Are they returning the conversation? So like, for instance, if a student said that the metal piece observed is rather rough, and the students like, actually, no, this is smooth, are they able to return that conversation and be engaged by being like, actually, I think that this item is smooth instead of rough. For student C, I would make sure that the ELL student met their objective by making sure they were able to properly read each item on the sheet. I'll have the students read what they write beneath each item on the recording sheet to me as a form of assessment. So after the activity is complete and they wrote down even simple words, like underneath the wooden block, if they just wrote light because the block is light in weight, I would have them read back to me what they wrote in each square as a form of assessment to make sure that they are reading what they are writing. For student D, I would make sure the ELL student met their language objective by observing what the student wrote for each object's description / their observation. Were they able to properly state what they noticed about each item correctly? So like, did what they noticed back up what the reality was to it?